Hey everybody. Um, this video is not going to be something I'm going to move through quickly. Just saying that up front. Informational videos where I can give you some real awesome rabbit holes. I just give it quickly and then I leave it up to people to look into that further if they want to take those cues. But on this topic, I can't really perceive any way to try to paint the bigger picture of the different things that I see here. Quickly though, up front, when it comes to bone, skeletal development potential, I linked in the box below some nutritional type components and things to research and then make a decision if you want to utilize any of those things. Some things that make a big difference because as many realize, there's a whole lot of things going on in society that are interrupting the endocrine and other systems in the body from being able to develop its actual genetic blueprint physically. Um, so the stuff I put in the box below is more about what's lacking, and then I would uh, I would have to say there's another side to that. There's all the synthetic, there's all the unnatural things interfering with your body's ability to do what it can do if it didn't have so much interference and blockage. I'm linking my detox protocol at the end of this video. It's my personal way of doing it. There are others out there. Any detox protocol that uses healthy means is better than none at all, by far. I shared mine. Um, but if you have a different way, you're interested in going about deep cellular detox, absolutely. I just you know, I commend you for that, let's say. So those are kind of the physical um, in and out of the situation. And for me, though, there's no way I can honestly talk about this without going into a lot more of a philosophical, spiritual, consciousness based discussion about it. It's going to look at a few different things and consider a few different things, okay? Um, my thumbnail, I took an old picture I have when I was 20. A picture I usually used to show how much male pattern hair loss I had, setting in pretty rapidly at the time. That's a different topic, different video, but it's also a picture that when I brought it up and showed that on past channels, people said, that's not you, that can't be you, that's not your face, you know. So I put right next to it a recent picture, taken like within the last month, um, to show the differences, which are, pretty strikingly obvious. There's some obvious things you can see, obvious changes in developments to skull structure, um, especially in the jaw, neck, parts of the skull, etc. Also better skin and hair now than I had then, um, by far, which should be encouraging to you. Um, so right up front, people ask me, a lot of young people say, is it possible to grow taller? Is it possible to further develop my skull, hands, whatever parts of my bone structure? And I have to say yes. I mean, I don't want to sound cheesy or cliche, but with God, all things are possible. What am I saying there? Here's another one that I know to be true, and I'm gonna try to shine light on this from some different angles in this video. But the world has an upside down paradigm they've had for thousands of years, thinking that life is physical and there might be a spiritual. There's something to this consciousness thing that seems to be coming from this physical, but it's actually the other way around. The physical world you see is actually the shadow of the unseen. Only unseen now because you're seeing this world with the physical eyes built to only see this world. But everything's actually coming from the origin, which is the other world, if you will. No matter which terminology I use, it's not really going to Is this thing even recording? Let me check real quick. Yeah, okay. So insert terminology that works for anything I say today. I'm just using something that works for me terminology wise. There are other words that can be used, and a lot of this stuff, honestly, it's really what's between the words and behind the words that's more important for those with the ears to hear what I'm saying there. But so there's this upside down paradigm, and one thing about it, um, I just wanted to say for those that are ready to hear it, and sit with it and contemplate it and go within and see what it brings up, explore it further, is that the actual natural state of things is miracles, and the unnatural state of things is lack of miracles. Okay. I know I'm losing the attention of some right now, and that's fine. This is for who it's for. And you know who you are. So you can look at this world and see a stark lack of miracles in most people's lives. Now, me personally, I have experienced many miracles in my life, things that are medically impossible. Of course, they're not, but I mean, that's the narrative of the world. And other impossibilities besides medical impossibilities, consciousness impossibilities. Things I'm not going to really say right now because they would distract from the topic. But I personally, and I know I'm not the only one, have experienced a lot of actual miracles in my life. And in those moments, I was in a state of, I was given um, like a break in the clouds and a light, and in a state of higher awareness to see it for what it is, the truth, and to feel it and experience it. Some of these occurred in out of body scenarios. Some of them occurred in body, but in either case, it was my spirit that was able to be experiencing what was happening, even when the body was going through something miraculous. Um, Again, I'm not going to get off into those stories because this video is probably already going to be pretty long, but I'm just putting out some concepts up front to kind of frame what it is I'm trying to show and share, some of it in this video. And that is that the truth is the real truth, not the narratives of the world, which is a false worldly truth that's actually upside down. But the real truth is miracles are the natural state of things. And you're taught that they're not even real. So again, it's an upside down paradigm. So right up front, for all of you that ask, yes, it's possible to grow taller, even as an adult. It's possible for your structure and appearance to change, even as an adult. You can see from the picture I posted that mine has. People could say I faked that, or that's not me, or I altered the picture, or whatever. I know all these technologies exist. So I'm not quite sure what my motive would be with that because I have nothing to sell to anybody. So, I mean, consider that. I have nothing to sell to anybody from this. This is a sincere effort to give. So you'll know a fruit by its trees, and you'll know a tree by its fruits, in other words. So, if I've experienced that, and I guess some would say it's miraculous. After some of the miracles I've been through, I don't even consider it to be that miraculous. But I don't want to underestimate the value of what it might mean to certain people that your appearance can change for what you might consider the better, even as an adult, including things like bone structure. Okay. The truth is, DNA can change, and what my soul always tells me on this topic, which is why I'm hesitant to talk about it, because I understand what I'm up against of all the narratives of all the so-called authorities of the world. But the inner truth, the inner knowing is testified to me over and over and over that as your consciousness changes, it affects your DNA, of course. You're the indwelling spirit. You're the actual conscious energy source that is dwelling within this material construct that it's holding together. And so any true change to your consciousness changes certain things about your physical DNA. And it takes time for the DNA to catch up, because here in the physical world we have this construct called time. It doesn't really work that way on the other side, if you will. There's not exactly anything you could call time there, but here we have that. So if something changes in your consciousness, a true significant change, and in this case we'll say an improvement, some kind of spiritual growth, whatever words you would like to use there, an expanded consciousness or something. In time, if you hold to that improvement, um, your physical form will do what it can to catch up to it. Uh, I say it'll do what it can. The spirit is much quicker than the flesh. The flesh will never be able to truly keep up with the spirit, but it'll do what it can. So obviously there's the physical side of this I mentioned in the beginning, the many things, the many artificial, the many synthetic, the many unnatural things interfering with the genetic blueprint you came into the world with. And there's also a real lack of some of the natural things you actually need for that blueprint to enact itself. A lot of people have studied some of this. I'm sure a lot of you have looked into some of these topics. You're probably pretty confused, but yeah, that's real. I've just given you some bullet points, some really important ones to look at in the info box below as far as tangible, pragmatic, physical elements you can work with. But the consciousness spiritual component is huge. The truth is, and I've seen this countless times, I can't talk about a lot of these things publicly. You start talking about miracles and healings and things, and you get in big trouble fast. I've been through it a lot, and I want to be here to be able to communicate with you guys, so I have to be very careful what I say. But again, it's really what's between the words and behind them. And some of you are going to get a lot out of this, I'm sure. So that's why I'm willing to do this. So where were we? Consciousness changes. If consciousness grows or improves or changes in any way significantly, and this can go the other way. You can see people, I've seen this, people bring this up. They go, look at this person when they were young, and then look at them years later after they had turned to the dark side, and they look like Emperor Palpatine or something, like a walking corpse with evil black light in its eyes or something. And yeah, you can see stuff like that. So consciousness can change in various directions and ways, and the flesh is, in its own way, doing what it can to catch up to reflect that accurately. It's important to understand your flesh is not you, though, and it's also really important to realize and keep aware of the fact that the ego only knows how to operate from its illusionary paradigm of superiority or victim inferiority. Okay, so a lot of people, when it comes to this topic, are going to immediately be asking how. But to me, it's much more important that before you even concern yourself with how, because how isn't going to do much for you unless you first are coming from a functional place as to why. Why? Why is it important to look a certain way? Now, if you're just looking to attain your actual genetic potential, I mean, that's healthy, it's natural, it's good, you should be. On the other hand, if you realize there are so many things working against you that may not be realistic, again, all things are possible with God. It may not be realistic where you are now and how things are now, but if my appearance has changed so much through my 30s and 40s, then, I don't put limitations on such things. It's a matter of getting enough sovereignty over your own consciousness first, and then your own physical situation, lifestyle, reality, whatever you want to call that, that it can make room for the changes in your consciousness to show up more in this physical life, right? So back to the why. A lot of what's going on is not something that is coming from a place of authenticity or value or what is good for you. In other words, in this world, the ego is profoundly insecure and it wants to come off as superior or believe its own victim narratives. And either thing that you feed into, actually, it's just descending further into darkness because everything here is upside down. So what the ego thinks is gain and growth and improvement is actually the opposite. It's actually descending further into darkness. Um, if you're extremely discouraged, frustrated, miserable about what you don't have that someone else has, now remember that's coveting. Okay, this is not a lecture. This is to look at the spiritual the spiritual laws that exist that are actually perfect, but they seem terrible to the ego because it's really ignorant and destructive to itself and others. So if you're suffering from, oh, poor me, I don't look how I want, or I don't have what I want, or I'm not good enough, or whatever, that's one thing pulling you into darkness. But I'll tell you something else. The people who get what they want with their ego, who get whatever they want, they are in a much worse situation than you are. In the world, in the upside down paradigm here, it looks like they're better off. Oh, he got the status, he's number one, whatever it was the person was going for. They get it, and it's like, oh, that's how you be a winner, that's how you win, or that's how you achieve, or that's how you become more, or whatever it is. But the problem is, when the ego actually gets what it wants, I wouldn't wish that on on anyone, on anybody, because it's not what it appears from the outside. In other words, for some of you, it's harder for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven than it is for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle. Now, remember, rich man is just a analogy for a lot of things. It can be money, sure, because that's one of the big ones in this world. That false imaginary thing invented called money that people spend their life chasing and thinking that's what life's about. And it's just like an image of a beast in a bunch of false credits and a bunch of games played accordingly. But you're born into it. It's not your fault. You didn't build this system. And again, this isn't a lecture to anyone, by the way. This is all just love and empathy and compassion. So if you can hear it that way, please do. I'm not blaming any of you for this. I'm just discussing the situation. So what does that parable mean, though? Harder for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. Well, whether it's money, whether it's a person who is rich in popularity or admiration or influence or status or worldly something, or they have all the things you want, they have what you think you need to be better, they supposedly have achieved or become whatever it is they're selling to you that supposedly you need to achieve or become, um, which is basically just taking advantage of people. But they don't they don't have hardly any chance at all of actually being able to cultivate the kingdom of heaven within themselves. Again, you can put different words for this if it suits you better. I understand that um, terminology can deter people from hearing what's behind it. So look past the words here. Just feel the concept if you can, if you will. But the kingdom of heaven is worth more than everything. If a man discovered a coin that represents the kingdom of heaven in a field, and he sells everything he has and gives everything he has away just to buy that field because he knows that coin's buried in it, what does that mean? It means that if you discover it, nobody else sees it, nobody else values it, but it's actually worth more than everything else in the world. And once you discover it, you know that. It's what you don't see that is the riches. Because again, what you see in this physical world is a shadow of what's real and where it's actually coming from. The real reality. A much, much higher consciousness, much greater reality of freedom and love and power and truth. This one's the illusionary one. This is where light and dark are tangled up and mixed up and very confused until they're not. So there's a great wisdom in that. So one thing to consider, if you have the ears to hear it, is that say you're in a situation where you feel like, well, I can't attain the physical body I want. Too many things interfered. I mean, I was born with birth defects that actually cost me my life at some point. during a surgery to repair it. And actually, that was a wonderful experience that changed everything, and it was meant to be. But what if you were born disfigured? Or what if somewhere along the line you became disfigured, right? And people are so mean to you. People are so cruel, unloving, and ignorant, which means they actually are to themselves as well. Think of what they're going to do to themselves if they become disfigured. Or when they leave this reality and have to face the kingdom within themselves and see what they've actually cultivated there. But if you're going through that, the hardship is very real, right? I'm taking an extreme example here. Instead of, oh, I'm not tall enough, or I don't have the social status, or whatever. Let's make it a little more extreme. Let's say you're disfigured and people shriek when they look at you, right? Life is so hard on you this way. Now, where wisdom would come in here and give you an opportunity is to realize, okay, obviously earthly life is hard for me. I am going without something that others have. I'm going without social acceptance. I'm going without you know some of the luxuries others may have in their life. Now the ego will only suffer from that. It'll either try to dominate and hurt and control and overcompensate in other ways, or it will just victim and hate itself and hate everybody and hate life and suffer. However, let's talk for a second about the concept of sacrifice. Now, normally we think of sacrifice as something you choose to do, like voluntary, right? Sadly, many do it to others, which is not what a sacrifice is. That's pagan and insane, and it's all too prevalent in this world, and it's blinded a lot of eyes for a lot of years. But let's take a real sacrifice. Let's talk about a healthy concept of sacrifice where you give up something because you know it will allow you to focus and cultivate on something inward that's more important, that's more significant, that's more valuable. Now let's just reframe it a little and say, what if you realize you're in a situation where you're already sacrificing something? You don't really have a choice. Like, my face is disfigured. I don't get any social graces. I've sacrificed people being nice to me. I've sacrificed having any kind of easy acceptance in society or this world. I've sacrificed even looking in the mirror and not being freaked out myself. That's a lot of sacrifice, and you didn't choose it, or so you think. You may have chosen it from a higher plane. Here's where wisdom comes in. You can take that and you can make it a voluntary sacrifice. You can say, if I'm giving up that much in this life, I can choose to be a victim and descend further into darkness, and things will get worse and worse and worse, because that's the only thing the ego's going to know to do with that. Or through the higher consciousness, for me, I'd call it a Christ consciousness. Some would call it a higher self. Some would call it divine. I don't care. Use the words that work for you. Try not to argue about it with others if you can help it. But the wisdom would be, you can own this sacrifice and you can trade it for profoundly more valuable things that are eternal. Because here's another fact that everybody knows, even their egos know this, but the ego denies it and hides from it because the ego is a coward. And all it ever does is look for its own comfort, even when it knows that it's impossible to achieve any of the things it wants. For example, your ego, let's give some examples. I want to look like this. I want to live like this. I want to have this. I want to do that. Okay, again, let's say your ego's given everything it wants. Well, guess what? It's 100% guarantee that every single bit of that is going to be taken from you. You're going to lose every last bit of that. You can dominate the world and lose your soul, and what have you actually gained? Because you're going to lose your worldly domination or the illusion thereof, and then you're going to have all the more darkness to face the reality of the implications of what you've chosen. So if you find yourself in a situation where, and I've been through this, not going to tell stories, but there's things that have absolutely broken my heart, that I had what it takes to achieve, but outside things that were outside of my control, circumstances made it impossible, things that were very important to me, and it broke my heart, and it was a great deal of suffering. And finally, when I took it to God completely, and I don't even have the words for this, but finally when there was really a shift, it's like I moved from the wrong side of the mirror where everything was backwards, And I found myself in a place of complete peace about it and actually gratitude. Because all of a sudden, I was given the eyes to see, the ears to hear, the heart to feel that that wasn't me anyway. The things my ego thought were so important to attain, if I had been allowed to have my way and go about my business and get what I wanted, I wouldn't have found what I have now, which maybe you can't see on the outside. I don't get to stand on some mountain and say, everybody look at me, I'm the very best, whatever. But what is that worth? What is it worth for one ego to make a bunch of others feel inferior? And they either worship you falsely, which is really cringy, or they hate you, which also sucks, right? And you're not doing anything good for your fellow human beings, which you're actually connected to. There is zero richness. There is zero reward. There's further depravity. That's what you've actually earned through your great effort and achievement. I'm just thinking about a certain particular thing that I didn't voluntarily choose to sacrifice from the earthly plane of existence, but I'm fully aware now that there was a higher purpose behind it and it was meant to be. It was really a chosen thing. It was a brutal lesson for me emotionally, and the struggle, the pain from it persisted every single day for 14 years straight. Misery. Okay? Now, some of you have been in misery about something a lot longer than that, but the principles are the principles. The principles are true. And if I lost you already because you're just like, tell me how to be taller and look better, it's like, well, I gave you some physical things to look into. But the real opportunity in here is not to say whether you should or shouldn't change your bone structure, whether that's meant to be for you or not. I can't say. I don't know your life plan, and I'm not going to try to look into that and read that for you. That's for you to find. That's for you to explore and discover. That's between you and God, like it's between all of us and God, but it's between all of us and each other too. And whatever the ego gets, whether it's victim or superior, it's hurting others, which means it's actually hurting itself. And in the illusion of time, the ignorant ego may not see that, but it's true. The spiritual principles are always true. So again, in this world, we're on the wrong side of the mirror. What we think is real is backwards and upside down, and what we think is winning is losing. So just remember that. That's for those that are ready to hear that and do something with it. And if you can do something with that, maybe you still will end up looking more the way you want or something along the way. I found that for me, it's things that I don't obsess about, but I just have an easy time believing are possible, like a childlike sense of wonder and joy about, but I don't really worry about whether they happen or not. Those things happen miraculously. But anything my ego becomes fixated on, I could literally set out with the best plan, the highest discipline, twice as much talent, and everything else, and I will be blocked from it. And I watched this pattern for the longest time, and I was very angry because I was only seeing it from my ego's perspective. I have more than earned this. Why do people who didn't put half as much into it get twice as much as I did? But see, there's that victim narrative, right? And what am I trying to achieve? A sense of feeling superior so I can finally feel secure about life? Wouldn't have worked. Wouldn't have worked at all. I would have felt more insecure about life than ever, more depraved, more desperate, more addicted to something that's pulling me further into darkness. Now everybody's hook points here are different. Some people be like, "Oh, that's easy for you to say, you look the way I want to look," because I hear that a lot. I'm not bragging about that, and I think it's a little cringy. I don't want people saying stuff like that about me or feeling that way about me or anybody else who is playing off of you and profiting off of that and trying to make you feel like they have something you need and don't have. And if you follow them around and worship them enough, you're going to end up getting something you need. That's really unfortunate, to put it lightly. Here's another thing to consider. A lot of you, especially the younger ones, probably feel like a certain height or a certain bone structure represents strength. Even if you couldn't fight your way out of a paper bag, you feel like if you looked a certain way, strength. Even if you would mentally break or emotionally break because, you haven't done anything in those areas, you just feel like if you looked a certain way, if you had a certain appearance, the image of the beast to be worshipped, you would feel secure. You would feel good enough about yourself. But it's not true at all. That's weakness. You know what strength is? Strength is someone who's able to be authentic in a world where that's just a clickbait word that you almost never find or see anywhere, especially in society. And again, I'm not lecturing any of you. This is not your fault. But how are you going to be authentic when you were born, raised, and your entire ideas of what reality is were cultivated in something completely artificial and unnatural and upside down and backwards? How are you supposed to be authentic? Like, literally, the only way to do it is to find a deep inner spiritual truth about who you are, a God given truth. There's no other way. And that's strength. A person like that, regardless of height or any other appearance thing, gender, nationality, all the other things that the ego has labeled and subcategorized everybody into to make everybody divided and miserable and ignorant. A person with actual authenticity, not all the fake stuff, not all the ego nonsense narratives. Actual authenticity is priceless to the individual, but it's also incredibly powerful because there is a blueprint of you, a spiritual blueprint that is one of a kind, that you came to do something to change this world for the better. There's nobody that didn't come for that. Nobody. Obviously, people get off course. You know, you could be Hitler if things go a certain way, but every person that comes here has an authentic spiritual blueprint of incredible capacity. And to whatever degree on the spectrum you come closer to or you actualize more of that, that's power. And power is unseen because, again, the seen world is just a shadow of the unseen, the real world. So it's a very interesting, maybe it's sort of like sounds like a paradox because sure, everybody cares how they look. I mean, we're wired to care how we look. We care how everything looks. I mean, look at the nature around me, how beautiful it is and wonderful and therapeutic and awesome and good for you just to be in it, just to see it. And then look at how people live. They live in these concrete, gray, coffin-like boxes, struggling to do what they were told is the way to life. And basically, most people can't even find their way out of the financial slavery, let alone all the other kinds of consciousness slavery that you're born right into. Not your fault, okay? And it's not even about whose fault it is. Assigning fault just means you're really just condemning yourself. And again, descending into darkness, that's ego. You will never blame your way out of anything. You will never condemn your way out of anything. You will never judge your way out of anything. You will only pull yourself deeper into darkness with all those practices. You know, the people most responsible for the most suffering on this planet, you got to understand, well, you don't have to understand, but it's profoundly valuable to understand that the universe is actually perfect. Even the physical one, where pain occurs. The other one behind it's even better. And the way spiritual truths work is actually perfect. It's very hard to see that because none of us like seeing puppies get run over and children dying of AIDS and all kinds of stuff that we see and we go through. But the way it really works in the eternal bigger scheme of things is perfect. And the people that you want to blame for making the world so bad, you got to understand they have dug themselves a very deep ditch, okay? The darkness and the depravity they suffer from, the addictions they're in, are so much worse than what you know. To be born into certain families on this planet means that you were handed the narratives of how to control the world. You're handed a lot of insane beliefs about what you are versus others. And you're forced into something they call cohesion by transgression. And it's so dark you guys don't even want to know about it. Unless you're already in it and you're out there and just know I feel a tremendous amount of empathy for you too. Because I wouldn't wish that on anybody. Believe it or not, to be born poor, what they call poor, is actually a huge advantage in this world. It's much easier for you to discover that there's a way to cultivate the kingdom of heaven within you. Yeshua went around telling people that good news all the time. It's been largely obscured by man's misunderstanding, by man's worldly view of spiritual things, which is, again, the wrong side of the mirror. It's all upside down and backwards. But it is the truth. So, whatever you think you're poor of, whatever you think you've been cheated out of, your ego's going to believe that. It's going to constantly want to come back up and revive those narratives, because that's the only way it knows how to think it's alive, is to compare. And like my brilliant musical genius, awesome, wonderful friend Johnny Appleshreds would say, and I know it's not his quote originally, but I heard it from him, um, comparisons are the death of joy. Would you rather have joy and live from a place of joy and maybe even authenticity and true power, which is life abundantly flowing, or would you rather live in miserable hatred and darkness and an obsessive sick need to try to control, micromanage, and enslave and own everything in the known universe? And even if you did achieve that, you'd just be looking for some way to what? Take over an unknown universe? I mean, the depravity never ends. It only gets worse. The gravity, it's like a tar pit. And the more you interact with it, the deeper you get sucked in. And you don't breathe anymore. You don't breathe the breath of life the further you go down that path. So these are all just things to consider, okay? I'm not telling you you should or shouldn't pursue uh, more height or bone structure developments or whatever. These things are all nice, you know? Just like a nice house is nice. It depends what you call nice. I mean, different people have very different ideas of that. Nice relationships are nice. Nice things are nice. We all know that. But remember, if any of us get what our ego says in life, we won't grow spiritually at all. And this life will have been a complete waste. Um, and all of us, even the darkest, most lost people, have opportunities constantly to repent of the ignorant, dark path they're on and start moving towards the light and growing and expanding and actually getting something out of this of value, real treasure. But you have to know that, and you have to be looking for that. What is the real meaning of every situation? What is the permanent value? What is the eternal value? What is the eternal opportunity there? Because again, your ego is very stupid. All of our egos are very, very stupid. That's one word for it. And they just want what they want, and they think if they get their candy, everything, then I'll be fine because I got enough candy, and they won't, because they're terrified of death, and the whole thing's just denial. And again, you say you conquer the world if that's what you think is of value. What did you win? You're going to go back to a place where you're going to have to comprehend and face that everything you did to everyone else, you're going to have to experience it and see it for what it is. You're not going to always be allowed to hide in the ignorance of your own ego. It's an illusion, and it's a temporary one. So look for the deeper value in everything in life. Physical practices, whatever it is, whatever you're looking at, whatever topic of worldly things you're into, remember that that's the shadow of what's real and what's real value. It's a perceptive illusion, like Einstein said, right? A very perceptive illusion. But it is. It has to be, no, he said persistent. I'm sorry. He said it's a very persistent illusion because it has to be. If the illusion was easy to see through, it'd be like lifting weights, but lifting like Nerf weights that aren't weights. It's like, oh, look at me throwing this big thing up and down. Are you really going to get stronger? Are you going to develop anything? Or are you just doing that because it looks cool? It's empty. It's a waste of your time. It's a waste of everybody's time. Everything the ego actually wants to do with your life is a complete waste of your time and everybody else's. At best, and at worst, it's a complete abuse of life itself. Humans are given everything they need to be the caretakers and the cultivators of this planet. It could be utopia. What are they doing? What have they been doing? Destroying, consuming, annihilating? So what is the ego fighting for? And what is it achieving? Death, destruction, depravity, darkness. So just look inward with these questions. It's cool to have goals, Um, Me personally, I'm tall already. I could rock being taller. I mean, if you asked me how tall you want to be, I'd probably be like, yeah, like 6'7". That sounds good to me. But I don't care. It doesn't matter. I can be 4'7", as long as I'm authentic and I'm coming from a place of authenticity. I'm living an existence that you can't see on the inside that comes from love and power and truth. And you know, what your temporary physical form looks like and compares supposedly to others is of so, it's like a grain of sand in the scheme of the universe when you're in a higher place of perception. It's just a situation to reflect on and do something accordingly. If you do worldly things about it, fine, but there's no eternal value, there's no gain. And if you get the height and the look and the whatever else you want, you're going to lose it all. And greater will be your fall because you invested everything you had in foolish things that are nothing compared to what you really are and what you really can be and what you're supposed to be looking for. And there's a greater pain waiting at the end of that path, a harder lesson, you know. So remember, if you feel cheated or you feel, lacking in something in the physical world, it's actually try to flip the mirror around and try to realize it's a profound opportunity and there's actually a great value. And your soul, your spirit, is looking for you to choose of your own free will to seek what that is and grow and attain true power, peace, love, and the force of life itself. All things come from love. Anything coming from fear is undoing creation. It can't ever truly win. It'll never actually undo creation. But we're allowed with our free will to go extinct on this planet and kill everything with us. And we're allowed to go to a dark place and be there for an eternity. If you don't repent, if you become stuck in a certain state of consciousness, there's no rules against exploring however far into the depravity and addiction and misery of darkness, or however far expanding into the actual truth of light and life and what you really are. Everything is a playground for that. Everything here is a playground for that. Service to others will give you something, and when you're doing it from your heart, it'll give you something inside of you people can't see that is life abundantly. And all of a sudden, money is just a ridiculous artificial joke, and so is everything else. All the things you're taught to chase and suffer for and make others suffer for. These things, these illusions and these traps, they all exist for good reason. You can't escape them by resenting them. You'll never escape them by fighting them. Who are you really fighting? What are you really fighting? If you think you need to hurt somebody else's ideology to break it down, what are you doing? You're just making the bars of your own cell thicker and stronger. And likely you're going to trigger them into doing the same with themselves. Unless they happen to have the wisdom or the interconnectedness to rise above it and to not engage in that with you. The ego argues, the ego needs to be the loudest, it needs to drop the most bombs and have the biggest attention and do the most whatever. And it's often the quietest people you've never heard of that actually have attained something that you can't see until you can, until your inner eye is open. And you're looking at what's eternal instead of what's just a trap. So that's a lot of philosophy on that topic. Can you grow taller as an adult? Yeah, there's documented cases. I grew a little taller, like an inch. I think it's just because I regenerated discs and things I had worn down. Um, but there's people that have been documented actually grow taller. You have to go dig this up yourself. It's not part of the public narrative. You're not supposed to think that's possible, whatever. So yeah, all things are possible. It really depends what is the higher cause behind what's going on in your life. What is the real reason? What is the real opportunity? Okay? So if somebody, and I haven't gone looking, but I'm sure people are out there selling you all kinds of ideas on what kind of face you need to have and what kind of height you need to have and how you're going to get it if you listen to them forever and keep trying all this stuff. But, but honestly, if you can look deep enough to see if that's coming from a place of fear, fear that you're not good enough, or fear that you can't be secure if you don't have a certain appearance, or whatever the fear is, a spiritual law, and this is true 100% of the time, people don't see it because the world teaches the opposite, but anything rooted in fear is never going to work out in your best interest or anybody else's. And anything actually rooted in love will, 100% of the time. If you can cultivate the inner vision to test that, those principles, like any true spiritual principle, you find out it's true. Then you're growing. Then you're becoming more powerful because you're aligning with the actual truth that is. The truth in creation coming from the truth of Creator, and whatever words you'd like to insert here. But I guess that's enough. Um, I'm sure it's very different from when you go click on other social media about having a different face or having a different height or having a different anything. All the fake lifestyles being sold that aren't even real, all this stuff, all this noise. I know a lot of you are really weary and tired of it, and that's good. You should be. There's no life in it. That's the problem. Everything the ego pursues, thinking it's going to be more life abundantly, it's always less. You can enslave every known human being on the planet. Do you think you'll really be more alive? Or do you think you'll actually be more sick, addicted, and stuck and twisted in your own prison than ever? You already know the answer deep inside. I love you guys. Over and out for now.